situation was that at the time for Team Silent, the Japanese developmental video game group within Konami that conceived and implemented the creation of the Silent Hill games, were that the continuity they established with the first three, and by extension the Room, being Silent Hill 4, were the series of games that are explained in this continuity, and all the information discussed, depicted, theorized, and presented for analysis are from these examples, and the mentioned timeline correlates to these facts, details, and events from this original theoretical combined timeline. As per dialogue mentioned in the first Silent Hill, but extensively depicted in the main story of the second Silent Hill as well as the Secret Book of Memories, from Sybil Bennett and Lisa Garland in Silent Hill 1 was the fact that Silent Hill was originally a distant and isolated town from the rest of the United States, with little to nothing in terms of a city or town worth mentioning. But later initial governmental development devastated the small town, and through modernization the townspeople became depressed with the urbanization of their community being that of Silent Hill. Specifically to cope, the townspeople turned to drugs and narcotics to handle the development and all of the pressures that came with it, as mentioned by Lisa Garland and confirmed by Michael Kaufman. Lisa further mentioned that the young people, as well as able-bodied citizens, left in search of better opportunities outside of Silent Hill. As a result of the situation, it became even worse for those that remained, and these remaining citizens in the town turned to ancient religions of the Native Americans and European cults from the immigrants to cope with the hopelessness that Silent Hill had become. This is the religious order that was prevalent in all three Silent Hill games, and even The Room, as mentioned by Michael, Dahlia Gillespie, Vincent Smith, Elisa Gillespie, and Claudia Wolf. What really went on in Silent Hill in terms of religious cult activity became done primarily away from public view, as outsiders would eventually consider the rumors that slowly came out of Silent Hill as impossible to believe, and the place was seen as an unlucky town with a terrible reputation, as mentioned by Douglas Cortland. Sybil Bennett was a police officer from a nearby town to Silent Hill, and even she hadn't heard about the full scope of what were going on in terms of accusations, claims, and rumors in Silent Hill behind closed doors away from public eyes. Harry Mason became a part of the conspiracy and was the first outsider in modern times to enter the realm, as coined by him being that of the alternate reality as the quote-unquote the other world. The situation with Silent Hill didn't change much in terms of severity or depravity from when Harry escaped with Sybil and Heather at the end of the first game, despite the fact that Sybil was erased from Silent Hill continuity completely. When James Sunderland receives the letter from Mary asking him to come to Silent Hill, he doesn't think too much of it, but later gets involved in the conspiracy as well. What's interesting is that the Silent Hill Historical Society, in which James passes through, gives important information about specific details relating to the history of Silent Hill. Further is the fact that once the player completes the game, then replays it with the completed data, and happens to discover the Book of Secrets near the Texacon gas station, where they can learn secret details about Silent Hill that's not known to casual players who would only play and experience the game once and be done with it. Combined with the information readily known from the game, and with the uncovered information from the Historical Society and secret information learned only from replaying the game with internet theories, had it that the area now known as Silent Hill was lived upon by indigenous Native Americans for thousands of years, before British settlement in the 16 and 1700s. And during this time there was extraordinary slaughter and blood spilt of the native people, and this greatly angered their various gods. The situation for Silent Hill didn't improve as when the American colonies declared their independence from Britain, and further war, death, and depravity permeated in the region. When the United States later took hold of the settlement and founded the town of Silent Hill, the death and murder were still there, but for a brief period of time everything was well. Then came even more conflict during the era of Silent Hill in the early to mid 1800s, as there was an abnormal amount of crime in the region, and law enforcement and even executioners were needed, which were the original origins of the pyramid head style torture soldiers / mercenaries to regain, maintain, and enforce order, depending on the endings that the player has James experience. This can be confirmed within game as per the ending where James decides to bring Mary back from the dead by making a sacrifice to the quote-unquote old gods, which are the Native American deities prior to British settlement or American development. As per dialogue from Claudio and Victor, and through information obtained by playing Heather through the game, the Order is a religious cult that has its origins in Europe, has a branch of its functions within the United States. It's hinted and theorized that the Order exists all over the world per religious rantings from Claudia. Claudia mentions that the world can only be reborn or perfected from the current world as is by death and destruction, in which God being recreated through a vessel and destroying it to recreate it in her image. God is specifically mentioned and depicted as a woman, and further hints to primal pagan religions across Europe of God being that of a woman, and women possibly being superior to men in terms of ability or spiritual power. Douglas and Victor both mention that a perfect world is flawed in and of itself, specifically because of the lack of freedom to choose what you want your life to be, and the struggling with life and of life is the beauty of living. Pain and suffering, these emotions, these sensations make people appreciate family, friends, loved ones, the euphoria of love, and the trauma of death. As Douglas said to Claudia, a world free from pain and suffering, or even more importantly of choice, would be boring. At the time of development for Silent Hill 4, it was widely believed to have begun as a completely separate horror-themed video game, not set in the Silent Hill universe or timeline relating to it at all, and popular belief as well as depictions and receptions from gamers is that the plot had been modified and reimagined partway through development or implementation as a Silent Hill based game. The belief is that the room was in part to be connected with and to Silent Hill in some form. It could have been influenced by the previous 3 Silent Hill games and not technically connected or have references to Silent Hill, and be in its own separate gaming universe. Confusion among gamers and critics often held the belief that in the earliest stages of development for the room was that it wasn't supposed to be an official Silent Hill game because development didn't know what sort of game the room would eventually become. But due in part as mentioned to long-time Silent Hill staff members working on the game's development, the completely separate concept of the room was later changed into that of a Silent Hill game, with details and facts of prior Silent Hill games being mentioned a few times in the game and literally not being mentioned further in the game, being Robbie the Rabbit from Silent Hill 3 seen in Eileen Galvin's bedroom in the room. The entire plot of the game, from Walter Sullivan, his younger or older self, to his other worlds, to even the 21 Sacraments, doesn't exactly seem like a Silent Hill game or concept, more like something inspired by it, but being that of something completely different. Summoning the Order's god specifically requires a woman, as mentioned in the first 3 Silent Hill games, and the idea was mostly, arguably, ignored in the room. So the argument was that the room was originally, as mentioned, a separate game. Later converted into a Silent Hill game during production seems possible and even likely. was the most innocent to enter the otherworld due to Dahlia summoning it. That's why the visual depiction of it wasn't as extreme as seen in later games. He just wanted to find his adopted daughter and leave, that's it. Most of the time he was in the otherworld, he didn't understand what was happening, so there was no real psychological imprint left by him when he left. He thought it was an illusion or a nightmare, but his desire to save Cheryl and escape with Sybil was what he desired the most and would fight to do. The modern otherworld was created by James due to the trauma experienced by steadily watching his wife Mary die before him and was unable to help her, as well as his pent-up and stressed sexual desires unable to be satisfied by Mary. Despite Mary apologizing to him and James telling her that it was perfectly alright and it wasn't her fault, it really was. There were countless sexualized depictions of women in his imprint of Silent Hill, from Maria to the bubblehead nurses to the mannequin monsters and even the obsession by Pyramid Head. Even other monsters shown in his imprint of Silent Hill were shown in countless bondage and fetish situations or positions. The anger he felt towards himself also resulted in a warped and bloody, gore-like otherworld. Only when he accepted what he did to Mary and escaped with Laura did he leave with a renewed interest for life, but his mind left an arguably permanently degraded, insane, sadistic version of the otherworld for future people to encounter. The otherworld when Heather first entered was exactly the same as when James left it, but they were much more sexualized monsters when she was there, which meant that James's imprint on the realm continued and even degraded the otherworld even more when he left. When Claudia ordered the murder of Harry, Heather was rocked with anger and pain over the death of her adopted father. It's also interesting to note that when Harry was killed, his position on the chair hinted that he might have been sleeping, and the fact that the monster killed him while he slept due to the fact that Harry also knew how to deal with monsters from the otherworld. So that was probably the only way to kill him, as Heather later realized this fact. From this point forward in the game, she ventured forward through the otherworld as it had an imprint of her, with a notable example of her imprint being Robbie the Rabbit, seen from her experience. Another example of Heather's mental imprint was the blood-veined walls. However, once Claudia and the god were dead, the otherworld quickly disappeared, as seen when she ventured back to the amusement park to meet up with Douglas and escape. This showed that Heather was innocent and pure, untainted by the otherworld, much like her father Harry was uncorruptible. The otherworld for Henry occurred in different parts, due to him being locked within his apartment and using different layers of the otherworld to get to different locations of the otherworld. As mentioned in Silent Hills 1 and 2, there were different realms of the otherworld, not just the main one depicted through the series, but bridges to other realms connected to the otherworld created by Walter. Henry actually traveled to and from these different locations, but due to popular opinions from gaming theorists, even developers of the series, as mentioned, the room wasn't technically a Silent Hill game, only in further development, so the other worlds that Henry experienced by Walter or explored by Walter were technically part of the Silent Hills lore in the same context when compared to the prior 3 Silent Hill games, which is why the depictions of the otherworld did not feel or resemble mostly the prior 3 games. The combined lore of all 4 original Silent Hill games, however, that due to the depictions of death, war, and trauma have made the town of Silent Hill perhaps the most paranormal area on the planet. The otherworld has always been there, but as per the Silent Hill Society, people have quote-unquote phased into and out of it at different times throughout history. Modern examples of the interior of the otherworld date to the people who have escaped it in the 1800s, as there were examples of minor demons who killed the people inside the realm when they happened to venture through to it, and the few that have escaped were driven mad by what they have seen and experienced there. Naturally, what they had rambled and told to others when they had escaped were just considered rantings and ravings by lunatics and those mentally insane, not taken seriously at all. This makes sense as per the wars and trauma from different eras in Silent Hill history. The otherworld has changed as a whole by the person or persons that have summoned it. As per Silent Hills 1, 2, and 3, a person who has experienced extraordinary trauma can actually summon it to cover the entire town or regions of it. Each time it's summoned, it changes to adapt to the person who had summoned it. Dahlia, James, and Claudia all summoned it in the original 3 games, and these people were heavily traumatized by experiences in their lives. Also, each time it was summoned, it changes and modifies itself to adapt and build upon prior summonings. This is why Otherworld had changed so much from the first time when Harry went through to it to the 4th time when Henry went through it, or, excluding the room, to when Heather went through it in the 3rd Silent Hill game. A theory goes that in particular when James summoned the Otherworld, it permanently altered the Otherworld due to his particularly bizarre and disturbed fixation for Mary. The bubblehead nurses, which were repressed sexualized desires for Mary, did not exist in Silent Hill 1 due to James not being in the Otherworld at the time, but were in Silent Hill 2 when he was introduced and entered Otherworld, and even 3 and 4. So even though he escaped Silent Hill, as mentioned, his psychological imprint was so strong and so disgusted that it permanently changed Otherworld, so the monsters that he had were later permanent additions to the Otherworld, seen in all future incarnations of the Otherworld. Innocent people can also be dragged into the Otherworld as well, and either keep their sanity but lose their physical form, as in Lisa from the 1st Silent Hill, or have their minds slowly deteriorate and go completely mad by what's happening around them, such as with Eddie Dorbowski in the 2nd Silent Hill. Even view the Otherworld with sort of sexualized undertones, as with Cynthia Velasquez in The Room. An interesting theory further elaborates in the Mother of God theory, in which Silent Hills 1 and 3 and The Room deal with the woman that births the female god into existence that will destroy and remake the world. The dialogue of Silent Hills 1 and 3 mention what needs to occur, but this is completely from the female point of view. The male side was never explored or explained. The theory goes further to mention that the male point of view isn't needed or wanted at all, and is actually irrelevant. Dahlia could in theory impregnate the holy woman with magic, so a man wouldn't be technically needed for insemination, so would the Father of God not be needed? The person who proposed the theory mentioned that it was highly unlikely that God would be conceived through biological ends, as using an example of Dahlia using magic to impregnate Alyssa. They proposed the Father of God is actually the conjurer. In The Room, Walter Sullivan was the conjurer who summoned God through the 21 sacraments. This theoretical assumption is plausible when considering that there is a memorandum in the Wish House asking for the progress of Walter and Alyssa has been located. The person mentions that there is no correct way, as long as it's done at all with Walter's progress, as he became the conjurer. The person mentions that the order wanted both Walter Sullivan as the conjurer and Alyssa Gillespie as the holy woman. The conjurer would, instead of using the Mother Stone, use the holy woman to descend God. Only when this occurs could or would God be truly born. The theory presenter further proposes the idea that mentioning the forms of God depicted in 1 and 3 and the room are defeatable. This means that those versions of God are incorrect, and the true version of God is immortal, hence unkillable. Of God is immortal. When Harry, Heather, or Henry killed the incarnations of God, it wasn't correct to be destroyed by mere mortals. They mentioned that the birthing process had been incorrect from the start. Using Silent Hill mythology, the man offered a snake to the sun, while the woman offered a reed. When Walter performs the ritual liberation, or alternatively, holy assumption, he uses the white oil, black cup, and 10 hearts of those who had sinned. The black cup is often considered the obsidian goblet from Silent Hill 2. If that's correct, then the speculation is that the reason why the opposition split between the sect of the Holy Woman and the sect of the Holy Mother, those that supported the Holy Woman believes that the woman is more important, and the man is just a conjurer, and any woman can be a conjurer as well if she's instructed properly, where the sect of the Holy Mother believes that the man is more important and the woman was only a vessel, and theoretically anything, even a stone, can be used. This was suggested in the play novel. The theorist concludes that Dahlia as a woman was the head priestess of her faction, which used to kidnap girls, and all the priests that were associated with the sect of the Holy Mother were all male. The children that were mentioned to have lived in the wish house, which were by association with the sect of the Holy Mother, were also all male, with the main example being that of Walter himself.